At 10 years old, I was running my mom's vitamin distribution business. I had 47 regular clients, kept detailed sales logs, and earned $600 a week. When the police found my notebook, I proudly showed them my customer tracking spreadsheets and business plan. I wore a handmade entrepreneur pin to court and asked the judge who would inherit the business after my mom got 12 years for making me deal drugs without me even knowing. I took over the family business at 10, the first time my mom asked me to help with her vitamin D delivery service. I thought I was the luckiest kid in the world. While my classmates ran lemonade stands or babysat, I was learning how to count cash and file taxes. As for why she chose me instead of using the mail, I just figured she trusted me to give that personal touch her customers valued. So even when I had to walk 6 blocks in the rain carrying my extra supplies, or when Mr. Benson yelled at me for waking him during his afternoon nap, I felt a deep sense of purpose. And when my teacher or friends asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'd proudly say entrepreneur. They were always impressed I knew the word, and I basked in their praise for being ambitious. No one questioned why I knew legal phrases like intent to distribute, or why I always had hundreds of dollars in my backpack. They just thought I was a kid playing make-believe. Then one afternoon, my mom stumbled out of her bedroom looking rough. I ran up to her, notebook in hand. "Mommy, look, I got 3 new customers today, all by myself. They said I was really smart." "That's great, baby," she mumbled, not really looking at me. Her hair was greasy and she kept scratching at her arms. "What day is it?" she asked. "Thursday." I bounced on my toes, hoping my excitement would make her want to hear about my new sales strategies. But suddenly her face went pale. "No, no, no, no!" She yanked the calendar off the wall. "Where the hell is Dante? He said Wednesday. He promised he'd be here on Wednesday." She started pacing, dialing her phone, muttering, "Pick up, pick up, pick up, you piece of—" When she threw the phone against the wall, I knew what she needed. "Mom, I collected early from the Fernandez family today, 200. Just like that, her whole face changed. 200! She counted it twice, then pulled me into a hug. "That's my smart baby, my little hustler. You just saved Mommy's whole day, you know that?" But before I could even enjoy the hug, she was grabbing her keys and running out the door. "I'll be back. Lock the door, okay?" Her tires screeched out of the driveway. I didn't even get to ask if we could eat dinner together. So I did what I always did for fun. I made myself some mac and cheese and practiced my sales pitch in the empty kitchen. Like any good business owner, I kept my marble notebook organized with detailed records and customer profiles. Mom reviewed my notes every night, praising my organization skills. But as I got older, I began to notice odd things about her. The way her hands shook while arranging the bottles, how she'd count the same capsules 3 times, how she'd panic if even one was missing. She'd send me to my room when making supplier calls, but I could hear her through the vents, begging someone named Luis for a few more days, promising she'd come through. Once I even heard her crying, saying something about using her kid but having no other choice. I figured running a business must be stressful for adults, so I tried to help. I learned which customers were high maintenance. Mr. Fernandez, who'd blow up my phone if I was 5 minutes late. Jasmine from the yellow building, who'd always meet me at the corner instead of at her door, glancing over her shoulder. The college kids who pooled money to buy in bulk, joking about studying better with our help. Rain or shine, homework or not, I was on the corner selling vitamins. Mom started giving me bigger commissions, $20 some weeks. I saved every cent in a shoebox, dreaming about one day having a real office. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I'd spent the whole day looking for my marble notebook and couldn't find it anywhere. Luckily, or unluckily, the principal called me to his office. 2 police officers were standing there, along with a woman in a pink suit who said her job was to help families. I immediately let out a breath of relief because right there in the woman's hand was my marble notebook. One of the officers spoke gently. "We need to ask you about your mom's vitamin business." I grinned from ear to ear. It was the first time anyone had actually asked me about it. I launched into a full explanation, proud as ever. My business origins, my record-keeping system, my high standards for customer service. I told them about the business cards I printed at the library, my payment collection methods, my plans for scaling up. I expected them to be impressed, to tell me I was brilliant. But instead, they just stared at me, mouths slightly open, exchanging looks I didn't quite understand. I didn't know it then, but my whole life was about to turn upside down. The woman in the pink suit leaned forward, her tone soft but serious. "We're going to need to call someone to pick you up while your mom helps the police with some questions." My heart skipped a beat. Mom was helping the police? That sounded important. Maybe they wanted her input on how we ran things. I bounced in my seat, eager. "Can you call Nadia from the yellow apartment? She's Mom's friend and one of our best customers." The adults exchanged another look. The woman in the pink nodded and asked for Nadia's number. I rattled it off easily, proud of my memorization skills. Just another part of being a good business person. 20 minutes later, Nadia walked into the principal's office. As soon as she saw the officers, she froze. Her face went pale and her hands trembled, just like Mom sometimes did. "Hi, Nadia," I waved enthusiastically. "Guess what? I showed the police all our business records. They were super interested in our delivery schedule and customer list. I even told them about your standing order for Tuesday afternoons." Her knees seemed to buckle slightly. She gripped the doorframe and stared at the officers like they were pointing weapons, not just holding clipboards. The woman in pink quickly stood up and guided Nadia to a chair. "It's okay," she said gently. "We just need you to take care of him for a little while." Nadia's voice was barely a whisper. "Where's his mom?" "She's helping us with our investigation," one of the officers said. I watched as Nadia signed some paperwork, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. The woman in pink kept patting her shoulder, but Nadia looked like she was about to throw up. In the car, I buckled myself in and immediately started planning. "Nadia, can we stop by the Fernandez house? It's Thursday, and I need to collect their payment. Mr. Fernandez gets really upset if I'm late. He already texted me 3 times today." Nadia slammed the brakes so hard, I lurched forward in my seatbelt. She pulled to the side of the road, threw open the door, and vomited onto the pavement. I watched in confusion as she leaned against the steering wheel, her whole body shaking. "Are you sick?" I asked when she finally shut the door. "Mom gets sick sometimes. Do you need vitamins? I've got extra in my backpack." Nadia burst into tears, loud, gulping sobs that made her shoulders heave. She kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like I'd just said something horrifying. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. I didn't mean to make you cry. Hey, I have a great idea. What if we start a customer referral program? You bring in new customers and get a discount on your next order. I've been working on the pricing model and everything." Nadia's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. She drove the rest of the way to her apartment in silence, tears silently sliding down her cheeks. I kept talking about profit margins and retention strategies, trying to cheer her up with business ideas. Her apartment smelled like cigarettes and something sour. Empty bottles crowded the coffee table, and dishes were stacked in the sink. Nadia collapsed on the couch, buried her face in her hands. "Can I use your phone?" I asked. "I need to call the Fernandez family about tomorrow's delivery, and the Johnsons still haven't paid for last week. Oh, and I should probably check in with the college kids. Friday's their usual older day." Nadia looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "How many customers do you have?" I puffed out my chest proudly. 47 regulars, plus a dozen or so who order now and then. Mom says I'm a natural. Want to see my customer tracking spreadsheet?
I'd made it on the library computer. Nadia stumbled into the bathroom and threw up again. When she came back, she was clutching her phone and shaking hands. I watched as she dialed a number, speaking in a rushed, frantic whisper. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "The kid, he knows everything. Every customer, every delivery, Oh God, what have we done?" I didn't get why she was so upset. Of course I knew everything. I managed the customer database. Nadia hung up and immediately called someone else. This time she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "I can't do this. I can't. I'm sick too, okay? I'm sick and I can't take care of a kid who... Please, you have to send someone else." An hour later, the woman in pink returned, this time with another lady who smiled way too much. Nadia was curled up on the couch, rocking back and forth. She'd been like that since hanging up the phone. "I'm sorry," she kept whispering. "I'm so sorry. I can't. I'm sick too." I still didn't understand why everyone kept saying they were sick. Maybe something was going around. I made a mental note to increase vitamin D supply in the neighborhood. The new adults drove me to a big building with bright lights and lots of offices. The woman in pink stayed with me while the other one made phone calls. They kept asking if I was hungry or tired, but I was too excited about all the attention to think about food. "We found emergency foster parents," the second woman said at last. "They'll take care of you tonight." An older couple arrived shortly after. They looked nervous but kind. The woman had silver hair and warm, soft eyes. The man kept his arm around her shoulders. They signed more papers while I packed my bag, double-checking that all my business materials were in order. "What's in the bag, sweetheart?" the foster mom asked gently. "Just my business stuff," I said proudly. I unzipped the backpack and showed them customer lists, delivery schedules, and today's collections. I pulled out a roll of cash and counted it carefully. $600. It was a great week. The Fernandez family paid early, and Nadia gave me a bonus for excellent service. The foster parents went pale. The man stepped back and pulled out his phone. The woman stared at the money like it might catch fire. "I also have my payment tracking sheets," I said, flipping through more papers. "See? Every customer, every payment, every delivery for the last 2 years. Mom says good records are the foundation of a successful business." The woman in pink took the papers from me, scanning them quickly. Her face drained of color the further she read. She whispered something to a colleague who ran off down the hallway. In the corner, the foster parents were arguing in hushed voices. I heard pieces: period, can't expose our other kids, safety concerns, not equipped. 20 minutes later, they were gone, and I was in the back seat of another car. This time the building was full of kids. Bunk beds, a TV room, that weird smell like old socks and cleaning fluid. "This is a temporary shelter," the woman in pink explained. "Just for tonight while we figure things out." I nodded, already planning how to continue operations from this new location. Maybe some of the kids would want to become customers or even partners. The shelter had strict rules about personal items, but they let me keep my notebook after going through it. One staff member turned green as she skimmed through my customer profiles. She whispered urgently to her supervisor, who started making phone calls right away. That night, I lay in the unfamiliar bunk, listening to the sounds of other kids snoring and crying. I pulled out my notebook and reviewed tomorrow's delivery schedule under the dim emergency light. The Fernandez family would be expecting their order. Nadia usually needed a Friday refill. The college kids liked to stock up for the weekend. I needed to find a way to contact everyone, let them know there'd be a temporary disruption in service. Mom always said good customer communication was essential during transitions. The next morning, I saw my mom's face on the TV in the common room. The news anchor was talking about a shocking case of child exploitation, a drug operation using a 10-year-old courier. I sat up straighter, excited. Our business was on the news, free advertising. Mom always said publicity was expensive, and here we are getting it for free. "That's my mom," I told the kid next to me. "We run a vitamin distribution service together. I'm the head of customer relations." The other kid slowly backed away from me like I was radioactive.
An older boy shook his head at me. "That ain't vitamins, stupid. Your mom had you dealing substances." "No," I insisted. "They're vitamins, special vitamins that help people feel better. I have the whole product catalog memorized if you want to hear about our different options." He laughed, but not in a nice way. "Man, you really don't know, do you? Your mom had you pushing pills to junkies." I was about to argue when a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Miss Alvarez, my teacher, was standing there, eyes full of tears. The shelter staff let her in, and she sat next to me carefully, like I might fall apart. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. All those presentations you gave about being an entrepreneur, all those business plans. You said I had the best business model in class," I reminded her proudly. "Remember, you gave me an A+ on my customer retention strategies presentation." Miss Alvarez began to cry harder. "I thought you were pretending, just playing business like other kids play house. I praised you for being creative and driven. I never imagined—" She pulled me into a hug, and I felt confused. Why was everyone so upset about something I was proud of? Later that day, a man in a suit came after lunch. He introduced himself as my lawyer. He had a kind face, but serious eyes. He sat down with a yellow legal pad and started asking me questions about the business. "This is great," I said, excited someone finally seemed interested in the real details. "We have 47 regular customers. The Fernandez family usually orders the most, $200 every Thursday, sometimes more if they need extra order. Nadia from the yellow apartment is always Tuesday afternoons. She meets me at the corner of 5th and Main." The lawyer scribbled furiously, his face growing more and more tense with every detail. When I started naming the college kids and their weekly orders, he held up a hand. "Do you understand what these vitamins really were?" he asked gently. "Mom said they were special vitamins. They help people feel better when they're sick. The blue ones give you energy, the white ones are for pain, the yellow ones help you stay awake if you need to study." The lawyer ran his hands down his face. "Has anyone explained why your mom was arrested?" "She's helping the police with questions," I said, repeating what the woman in pink had told me. "Probably about regulations or taxes. Mom always said the government makes it hard for small businesses." That evening, the phone rang in the shelter office. A staff member waved me over. "It's your mom." I grabbed the receiver, thrilled. "Mom, guess what? We were on TV. The news talked about our business, and I gave the police our customer list so they can help us grow. Isn't that amazing?" "Baby, stop." Her voice sounded completely different, rough, shaky. "Stop talking about the business, please." "But Mom, I made $600 this week. The Fernandez family paid early and—" "Stop." She was crying now. "Please, baby, no more. Don't talk about it anymore. Not to anyone." "I don't understand," I said, voice small. "Did I mess something up? I followed all the steps you taught me. I kept perfect records. I never missed a delivery." "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Mommy did. Mommy did something very wrong, and I'm so sorry." The line clicked. She was gone. I stood there, the receiver still pressed to my ear. I was more confused than ever. How could building a successful business be wrong? The next day, a new woman came to visit. She introduced herself as an investigator and brought boxes of evidence, my marble notebook, what looked like Mom's phone records, and printed messages. She held one up. "Can you tell me what 'need 30 blues by Thursday' means?" "Oh, that's easy," I said, leaning forward. "Blue vitamins, 30 pills, Thursday delivery. Probably for the Fernandez family. They always order in bulk." She held up another message. "What about white angels for the usual spot?" "Oh, white vitamins for Nadia. She calls them angels sometimes. The usual spot is 5th and Main. She doesn't like us going to her apartment during the day."
"Do you recognize this phone number?" the investigator asked, pointing to a line highlighted in yellow. I studied it carefully. "That's Mr. Torres. See, he called 17 times last Tuesday. He gets really anxious when deliveries are late. Mom says he's our most difficult customer, but he pays well, so we always try to keep him happy." Page after page, I identified numbers, explained code words, and detailed delivery routes and timing. The investigator's face got more and more serious with each answer I gave. "You have an incredible memory," she said finally. "Thanks," I said with a little pride. "Mom says a good entrepreneur has to know their business inside and out. Oh, can someone call Mr. Torres? He's probably worried I didn't show up yesterday. He gets upset if I miss a delivery." "Mr. Torres has been arrested," she said quietly. My mouth fell open. "Arrested? But why? He's just a customer. He never caused trouble except for calling too much." "He wasn't just a customer. He was a major dealer. We'd been trying to catch him for years." The words didn't make sense in my head. Dealer? But he bought vitamins from us. Unless... "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're wrong. We sell vitamins. Special vitamins. Mom told me." But as the words left my mouth, something cold began to spread through my chest. I thought of Mom's trembling hands, customers meeting me at corners, the whispers through the vents, her tearful phone calls about using her kid. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe. The investigator reached out like she wanted to steady me, but I pulled away. I want to go home. I have deliveries to make. People are counting on me. You can't go home, and there won't be any more deliveries. That night, the news ran another story about my mom. This time, they mentioned me by name. They called me the 10-year-old substance courier. They said it was one of the worst cases of child endangerment in county history. I buried my head under my pillow, but I could still hear the whispers from the other kids. What a heartbreaking moment, they said. The way the kid proudly showed off those records, thinking it was all normal. My heart broke listening. The drug dealer's kid, the one who didn't even know. How could I not have known? I thought about all the times I bragged at school, how the teachers praised my ambition, how special I felt carrying a backpack full of what I believed were vitamins. Later that night, the woman in pink found me crying into my blanket. She sat quietly on the edge of the bunk, not saying anything for a long time. When I finally looked up, she handed me a tissue. It's not your fault. You were just a kid trying to help your mom. I was good at it. I was really good at it. I know, she said softly. That's what makes this so hard. The next morning brought more investigators, more questions, and more evidence that my vitamin business had been something else entirely. They showed me security camera footage, grainy photos of deliveries, recordings of phone calls. That's Nadia, I pointed to a photo. She's one of our Tuesday regulars. Nadia is in custody. She's been admitted to a treatment program. Treatment for what? I wanted to ask. But deep down, I was beginning to understand. All those trembling hands, all those panicked texts, all those sick-looking customers who couldn't wait until their next order. They weren't waiting on vitamins. 3 days later, my Aunt Teresa came to the shelter. I hadn't seen her since I was little. She looked older and smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched like something was weighing her down. She signed the custody papers, then helped me pack what little I had. I tried to explain to her the importance of maintaining good customer relations during a transition period. Her hands froze when she found my backup supply list tucked into the pages of my math book. She read it slowly, then folded it and slipped it into her purse without saying a word. The drive to her house took 2 hours. I spent the time calculating missed profits and wondering if Mom had made arrangements to keep the business running while she was away. Aunt Teresa kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, her forehead lined with worry.
Her house smelled like vanilla candles and clean laundry. Everything was neat and orderly, so different from the cluttered, chaotic apartment I'd grown up in. She showed me to a small bedroom with dinosaur wallpaper and rocket ship sheets on a twin bed. While she made dinner, I found her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, in the living room, playing with plastic coins from a board game. A perfect opportunity for a business lesson. I sat down beside her and started explaining profit margins using the play money, showing her how to calculate markups and understand return on investment. Aunt Teresa rushed in as soon as she heard me teaching Sophia about customer acquisition costs. She scooped up the plastic coins quickly and sent Sophia to wash her hands. Then she knelt in front of me, her eyes serious and kind. "We're not going to talk about the business anymore," she said softly. "It wasn't a real business." I nodded like I understood, but inside I was already calculating how many missed delivery days would cause irreversible damage to our customer base. The next morning, she drove me to a cheerful building with bright walls and toys in the waiting room. A woman named Dr. Catherine introduced herself as my therapist. She smiled warmly and led me into her office. I immediately pulled out my notebook to show her the latest version of my business plan, which I'd drawn in crayon during art time at the shelter. She studied it carefully, asking thoughtful questions about my delivery routes and customer service standards. I explained everything eagerly, how I tracked payments, handled difficult clients, and ensured product quality. She nodded and took notes the whole time. After our session, she spoke quietly with Aunt Teresa in the hallway. I caught pieces of the conversation through the door, phrases like complete indoctrination and long-term therapeutic intervention, words I didn't understand.
That afternoon, Aunt Teresa enrolled me in a support group for kids whose parents struggled with addiction. The other children shared stories about their parents being sick, being absent, or disappearing for days. But I explained that my case was different. We weren't dealing with sickness, we were entrepreneurs. I proudly described our business model to the group. One girl named Kat interrupted to say her dad had been an entrepreneur too until he was arrested for selling drugs. I corrected her immediately. We sold vitamins, not substances. The room fell silent. A few kids exchanged the same sort of pitying, knowing glances I remembered from the shelter. Back at Aunt Teresa's house, I found a folder on her desk while looking for paper to sketch a customer retention strategy. Inside were newspaper clippings about Mom's case. The headlines made my stomach twist. Mother uses child in drug ring. 10-year-old unwitting substance courier. I spent the afternoon turning the articles into a scrapbook, carefully cutting each one and organizing them by date. This was the best publicity our business had ever gotten. Maybe it would attract investors or bring new opportunities for growth. That evening, Aunt Teresa found me with the scrapbook spread across the floor. Her face went pale as she flipped through it. She sat down slowly on the couch and pulled me beside her. She tried again to explain about addiction and illegal substances, but I was still focused on what the media exposure could mean for our brand. The next week, Mom's lawyer came to visit. He told us that Mom was now claiming I had been a willing participant to reduce her own sentence. I nodded eagerly. Of course I was willing. I worked hard. I was proud to help. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Then he asked if I understood that what we had sold was illegal. I explained that Mom had the right permits and always paid taxes. He showed me documents that said otherwise, but I figured they must be mistaken. When the prosecutor came, I gave even more details. I showed her my customer satisfaction surveys and explained our loyalty rewards program. She asked if I really knew the business inside and out. I said yes, proudly. Every customer, every route, every price point. She thanked me for my honesty, but exchanged a long, worried look with my lawyer. I didn't get it. Why was everyone so concerned about our success? Then came the news that Dante had been arrested, thanks to the details I'd shared. My first thought was about the supply chain. What about the deliveries? Have the customers been notified of the disruption? Everyone in the room looked at me with that now familiar expression, a mix of sorrow, disbelief, and something like helplessness.
School became complicated. The district placed me in a new school where no one knew my story. But I couldn't help myself. I kept talking about my business experience. When we had to write essays about our role models, I wrote about my mom teaching me entrepreneurship. My new teacher, Mrs. O'Catherine, called Aunt Teresa after reading it. I didn't understand why. It had been a great essay. Then there was another meeting. More adults. More furrowed brows. More people trying to explain things I didn't want to understand. A judge issued a court order telling me I wasn't allowed to discuss the case in public anymore. I was confused. Didn't he know publicity was essential for business growth? How were we supposed to attract new customers without marketing? Meanwhile, investigators discovered that Mom's commissary account at the jail was receiving money from unknown sources. I recognized some of the names from her visitor log, our bulk order customers. I felt relieved knowing they were standing by her during this rough patch. Loyal clients mattered. At home, things were getting tense. Aunt Teresa's husband, Robert, began voicing concerns about having a drug dealer's kid under his roof. He worried what his coworkers would think, how it might affect his reputation. Their arguments got louder each night, even though they tried to keep their voices down. Wanting to help, I made a presentation using Sophia's crayons, outlining customer service techniques that could improve household efficiency. I included graphs and action plans. It didn't go well. Robert demanded I leave, saying he wouldn't expose Sophia to criminal influences. Aunt Teresa cried while packing my things again. I apologized for not explaining the business model clearly enough and promised to make better visual aids next time. My second emergency placement was with an older couple who specialized in troubled children. They had strict rules. No talking about my past. But I couldn't help sharing customer service tips during dinner. I offered to help them streamline errands and suggested optimal routes for grocery shopping. They looked exhausted. The legal prep ramped up. The prosecutor realized my memory was incredibly detailed and could be used to build the entire case. I started practicing my testimony, creating flowcharts of our distribution network and outlining our innovative pricing system. Every business lesson Mom taught me, I had documented. Every chart, every process, every customer relationship. Then came the day I saw Mom again. It was a pre-trial hearing. She looked different. Thin, gray, like she'd aged 10 years in a month. Her hands shook worse than ever as she sat at the defense table. When our eyes met across the courtroom, she mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. I mouthed back, "Business is hard, but we'll get through it." She broke down in tears, burying her face in her hands. I didn't understand why. Every business faced challenges. Dr. Catherine, my therapist, increased our sessions. She began using terms like complete lack of trauma recognition in her notes. I thought that meant I was being resilient. I brought her new business plans each week, exploring ideas for expanding into new markets when Mom got out. The other kids at my new placement avoided me after learning about my background. They called me the drug kid behind my back. I tried explaining we were entrepreneurs, not criminals, but no one wanted to hear it. Everything shifted when my grandmother arrived from Puerto Rico. She hadn't seen me since before the vitamin business began. She mostly spoke Spanish, but I understood enough. She sobbed as she looked through my business records. She kept pointing at dates and shaking her head, tears running down her cheeks. Then she showed me old photos of Mom, smiling, playing with me at the park, looking healthy. Then she showed me a date on a document, my dad's death certificate. The business had started right after he died. During trial prep, videos surfaced. Footage of me at 8 years old counting stacks of money while Mom coached me on customer satisfaction techniques. The prosecutor played them in a meeting. Everyone looked sick, but I watched proudly. My younger self had been so sharp, so professional. Parents from my old school testified about finding pills in their kids' backpacks. They were traced back to us. I panicked. What about quality control? We'd always been careful with inventory. We had protocols. Then they looked into my academic records. A pattern started to emerge.
Perfect attendance on delivery days, but frequent absences whenever Mom was sick. To me, it was proof of my commitment to the business, evidence of a strong work ethic. But the prosecutor saw something else entirely. After reviewing my meticulous testimony prep, Mom's defense attorney requested a competency evaluation. He said the level of exploitation was unlike anything he'd ever seen. I assumed he meant I was unusually skilled for my age. The prosecutor refused all plea deals. She cited what she called extreme child endangerment. To help clarify things, I created a presentation about how the business had actually taught me valuable skills, but no one wanted to see it. During testimony rehearsals, I explained our loyalty program in detail. Customers earned points for consistent orders, which could be redeemed for free products. I'd built the system myself, tracking it by hand. The prosecutor documented every word while shaking her head. A child psychologist testified that I showed signs of criminal grooming dating back to early childhood. I smiled, proud someone recognized how early my training had started. Then came a message from Mom, relayed through her lawyer. She was getting clean, she said. I figured she meant she was taking hygiene more seriously in prison, and I made a note to send her some soap. The trial began, and I was called as the star witness. I wore my best shirt, with my handmade entrepreneur pin from Craft Time proudly on display. Dr. Catherine had asked me not to wear it, but I insisted. It represented my professional identity. My testimony began with how I'd learned to count cash at age 6. The jury looked shocked. I thought they were impressed. I described our growth strategy, customer acquisition techniques, pricing models, and delivery logistics. The prosecutor walked me through a timeline. Each of my answers built out a clearer picture of our operations. I talked about quality control, inventory checks, and financial planning. The court reporter typed faster and faster. When I explained hiding product inside my teddy bear during prior police visits, Mom broke down sobbing at the defendant's table. I paused, unsure why she was crying, but I knew that part was important. It was one of our key safety protocols. The defense cross-examination only gave me more opportunities to talk about the business. I eagerly explained our discount tiers, strategic expansion goals, and customer segmentation by order history. The defense attorney gave up halfway through, rubbing his eyes. During a recess, I raised my hand and asked the judge if we could restart the business once Mom got out. The room went completely silent. I used the break to network, offering handwritten business cards to observers in the gallery. At lunch, I overheard one of the prosecutors say, "Mine was the worst child endangerment case we've seen." I took that as a compliment. Our business had been so efficient, so organized, it stood out. That afternoon, they presented medical records I didn't even know existed. Apparently, when I was 9, I'd been hospitalized with exhaustion. The doctor testified it was actually withdrawal from secondhand substance exposure. I remembered that week. It had been a particularly busy period. More records showed developmental delays from long-term handling of unregulated substances. My small size wasn't just genetics, it was exposure. Still, I thought about how carefully I'd counted each capsule, how precise I'd always been. Mom's defense finally changed tactics. They stopped calling me a willing participant. My testimony had made that defense impossible. Mom admitted everything. I took notes the whole time, for the future business memoir, of course. Carlos testified under his plea deal. He confirmed that Mom used me because police rarely suspect children. I was frustrated. Those were strategic insights, our competitive edge. Now they were public. When Mom broke down on the stand, sobbing through her full confession, I kept writing. Her words would make a powerful foreword someday. The verdict came fast. Guilty, on all counts. As the judge read the charges, I raised my hand to ask who would inherit the business. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge had to call for order. 2 weeks later came the sentencing. I wore my best shirt with my handmade entrepreneur pin firmly attached. Dr. Catherine sat beside me. She'd explained over and over that today was not a business meeting, that Mom would be receiving her punishment. I'd prepared a business continuity plan for the judge. It outlined how operations could resume under new management. They brought Mom in wearing orange. I barely recognized her. So thin, hair limp, eyes vacant. I waved. She didn't wave back. The prosecutor presented every detail of my involvement. The judge's face grew darker with each point. Mom's lawyer argued for leniency. He mentioned her completion of a treatment program and read letters from other inmates about her remorse. I made a note, possible testimonial material for future use. Finally, the judge spoke. He said it was the worst child exploitation case he'd seen in 30 years. He sentenced Mom to a minimum of 12 years. I raised my hand again, this time to ask about business succession. The bailiff moved toward me, but Dr. Catherine grabbed my arm and shook her head. I watched them lead Mom away. No one answered my question. Outside, I tried to hand the judge my business continuity plan. No one took it. The therapeutic boarding school looked normal from the outside, but inside, everything was different. No backpacks in rooms, supervised phone calls, group therapy daily. My roommate, Marcus, had been there 6 months. He gave me the tour listing the rules. No discussing past crimes, no recruiting, No business talk. I lasted 2 days before I broke that last one, trying to explain profit margins during math class. The teacher redirected me gently, but I'd already drawn a supply chain diagram on the whiteboard. That earned me my first one-on-one with the school's therapist, Dr. Patricia. She specialized in criminal thinking patterns. She asked me to describe a typical day before Mom's arrest. I told her inventory checks, delivery schedule reviews, confirming appointments. She took notes. Then she showed me a diagram of her own, a chart showing how Mom had normalized illegal activity from the time I was 6. I studied it closely, trying to extract business insights from the pattern. Dr. Patricia sighed and scheduled daily sessions. Group therapy was even harder. The other kids spoke of their parents with shame or anger. When it was my turn, I called it the family business and described our distribution model. A boy named David interrupted. He said his little sister overdosed on pills she bought at school. The therapist asked me if I understood the connection. I suggested improving quality control. That night, Marcus told me about his dad's meth lab, how he thought they were making medicine, how his sister died from contaminated product, how it took him 4 months here to say the word drugs instead of medicine. I listened carefully while organizing my notes, still labeling everything under business education. The breakthrough came during art therapy. They asked me to draw our families. I drew an org chart, Mom as CEO, me as operations manager. The therapist asked me to draw a memory of us doing something that wasn't business. I couldn't. My pencil hovered over the paper for the entire hour. Later, Dr. Patricia read portions of Carlos's full testimony. The part where Mom traded my services when money was short made me pause. I thought those were strategic alliances. Carlos described her bringing me into substance houses as insurance, knowing no one would hurt a kid.
How Mom would increase her own use to cope with the guilt. How the cycle just kept spiraling. Something inside me shifted. I set the pages down and stared at the wall. Carlos's testimony was breaking something in me, something I didn't have a name for yet. Reading his words, I could feel the edges of my world starting to come apart. All those strategic partnerships, they weren't strategy. They were Mom trading me, her child, for substances. Dr. Patricia waited quietly. I picked up the transcript again and found the part where Carlos described Mom nodding off while I counted money in the corner. I used to cover her with a blanket and lock the door, thinking she was just exhausted from working hard. Carlos said the dealers used to laugh, called me the little businessman, while Mom lay unconscious. My hands began to shake. Not like Mom's jittery, frantic tremors. Something else entirely. Something I didn't know how to control. Dr. Patricia asked what I was feeling. I didn't have the words. She suggested we go for a walk. We went to the school garden. Real vegetables grew there. Tomatoes, cucumbers, herbs. Not code words, not product lines. As we walked between rows of tomato plants, she asked me about my earliest memory of Mom before the business. I told her about a birthday party, maybe my 5th, a homemade cake, Mom singing. That was before Dad died, before the business, before the shaking hands and the locked doors. That night, I couldn't sleep. Marcus noticed. "What's wrong?" he whispered. I remembered the birthday cake. Her voice used to sound different. He nodded. My dad used to build model airplanes with me, before the lab. We lay there, in our separate beds, sharing blurry fragments of the people our parents used to be. At the next group session, when the therapist asked about our families, I said, "My mom was sick." The words didn't feel quite right, like wearing shoes a size too small. The therapist nodded gently. She made me sick, too, though I wasn't exactly sure how.
David leaned over and squeezed my shoulder. Days passed in quiet routine. School, therapy, structured activities meant to rewire our thinking. I stopped drawing business plans during free time. Instead, I read everything I could about addiction. The school library had entire shelves of books on it, spines cracked, pages smudged from constant use. I read about dopamine, about dependency, how addiction rewires your brain, about grief, trauma, genetic factors, environmental triggers. During a family therapy session, Aunt Teresa joined via video call. I asked if Mom had shown signs of this before Dad died. She cried as she answered. Mom had been a straight-A student, she said. Volleyball team. Wanted to be a nurse. Then Dad got sick. The pills were his at first, prescription painkillers. But Mom had started taking them too. Couldn't stand watching him suffer. 3 months after the funeral, the vitamin business began. Aunt Teresa said she tried to help, but Mom swore she had everything under control. A vitamin delivery gig didn't sound dangerous. Aunt Teresa never imagined Mom would involve me. That afternoon, in individual therapy, I cried for the first time since everything happened. Not out of frustration, not like a businessman dealing with setbacks. Something deeper, raw. Dr. Patricia handed me a box of tissues and waited while I tried to breathe between sobs. I said she was supposed to protect me. The words startled even me. The entrepreneur pin had sat untouched in my disk drawer for weeks. That night, I took it out and brought it to group. I told them how I'd made it, how proud I'd been to wear it during the trial, how it had once meant everything to me. The therapist asked, "What do you want to do with it now?" I don't know. David said I should burn it. Marcus thought I should keep it, to remind myself. Others in the group shared stories of what they did with objects from their past. Some buried them. Others threw them into rivers. A few turned them into something new. I held the pin. Cheap plastic, lighter than it had any right to be, but it felt heavy. The school had a fire pit used for therapeutic ceremonies. That Friday night, we lit it. 3 of us participated. A girl tossed in her father's arrest record. Marcus threw a photo of the lab where he'd spent half his childhood. I stood at the edge of the flames, the pin warm in my hand. I remembered standing in court, explaining customer retention strategies. Then I dropped it in. The plastic curled, melted, blackened. I waited for something to change. Nothing happened immediately. But that night, I slept through the night. No delivery schedules, no mental inventory checks. Just sleep. PE became my favorite class. Running laps gave my brain a break from spreadsheets. Shooting hoops forced me to stay present. There were no projections to make, no products to sell.
My teammates didn't know my full story. All they knew was that my mom was in prison. To them, I was just another kid who couldn't make a layup. One afternoon, the coach pulled me aside. He'd noticed the way I organized the equipment every day. Without even thinking about it, I was creating an inventory system. But instead of scolding me, he asked if I wanted to be the team manager, a real, legitimate role where I could use those same skills, but in a healthy way. I accepted, then spent an entire therapy session with Dr. Patricia trying to figure out why this felt different from the business. After 3 months, letters from Mom started arriving. At first, they were filled with the same apologies and promises I'd heard before. Dr. Patricia helped me write responses, letters with boundaries. I told Mom about school, basketball, learning to see myself as more than her business partner. I didn't mention that I still sometimes caught myself calculating lost revenue. Then came news through official channels. Mom had completed her substance abuse program in prison. She'd earned her GED. She'd started leading support groups for other inmates. Her letters began to change. They weren't just about saying sorry anymore. She started writing about her therapy, about what she'd done to me, about learning how grief had turned into addiction. I wrote back about burning the pin, about crying in therapy,
about what it felt like to play basketball without trying to turn it into a business opportunity. I even told her how I still sometimes analyzed behavior in the lunch line, catching myself building customer profiles based on sandwich preferences. Recovery wasn't linear for either of us. 6 months in, during a career planning class, they asked us to imagine our futures. The other kids said mechanic, teacher, counselor. When it was my turn, I surprised myself. Social worker, I said. The teacher asked why. I thought about all the kids out there, kids like me, who might be counting pills and thinking they were entrepreneurs, kids who needed someone to notice. The school helped arrange a volunteer spot at a community center. I worked with after-school programs, keeping an eye out for kids who seemed too fluent in adult problems. One boy bragged about helping with his uncle's import business. I saw the pride in his eyes, heard the puff in his chest when he talked about orders and deliveries. I told the program director. She knew how to report it the right way. My testimony later helped convict 2 other parents who'd used their kids to run substances. I attended one of the trials. The girl on the stand was 12. She'd been dealing since she was 9. She wore a little business girl badge she'd made herself. I saw myself in her confused smile when the verdict was read. Afterward, the prosecutor from Mom's case sat beside me. She thanked me, said my case had changed how they approached child exploitation and drug crimes. New protocols, better support. I didn't feel pride exactly, but something close to it. Maybe purpose, like my story meant something bigger than a balance sheet. At the end of the year ceremony, they gave out academic awards, recognition for growth. I'd kept up good grades, learned to engage with school without filtering everything through a business lens. When they called my name for most improved perspective, I walked up without the entrepreneur pen. I accepted the certificate as a kid who'd survived something terrible, a kid who was still learning how to heal. That night, I called Aunt Teresa, told her about the award, the college plans, my desire to help kids like me. She cried, happy tears this time. Said Sophia had been asking when I'd come visit. We made plans for supervised visits, with clear boundaries about what we could and couldn't talk about. This time, I felt ready to just be a cousin, not a mentor. The college acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. State University, social work program, partial scholarship. The scholarship committee had read my essay about transformation. I'd written about the birthday cake, about Mom's trembling hands, about burning the pen, about learning that real success means breaking cycles, not growing them, that the best business model is helping kids escape the ones that are destroying them. When I showed Dr. Patricia the letter, she smiled. We'd spent months practicing future planning that didn't involve profit margins or black market logistics. She asked how it felt to have legitimate goals. I admitted I still sometimes calculated the scholarship amount against potential substance revenue. She nodded. That's okay, she said. Healing isn't subtraction. It's learning to carry the weight differently.
Recovery meant learning to acknowledge those thoughts, not pretending they were gone. Mom's parole hearing was scheduled for 5 years out. I wrote a letter for her file supporting her release with conditions: continued treatment, supervised visits only, no unsupervised contact until I felt ready. In the letter, I described my progress, my college plans, my understanding of what she'd taken from me, and, despite everything, my hope that she could recover too, that she could find her way back to the person she'd been before grief and pills swallowed her whole. The last day at therapeutic boarding school didn't feel real. Marcus had left months ago. He was working at his uncle's real auto shop. David was starting community college. We exchanged contact info and promised to stay in touch, not as substance dealer kids, but as friends, survivors. I packed slowly, carefully. I left behind the mental inventory systems, the customer tracking habits. I took with me the basketball team photo, my acceptance letter, and the quiet knowledge that I'd survived something that could have destroyed me. Dr. Patricia hugged me goodbye. She reminded me healing isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every day.
Aunt Teresa picked me up in the same car that had once taken me away from everything I knew. But this time, I didn't spend the drive calculating lost revenue. This time, I looked out the window. I asked about Sophia's school play. I shared my fall class schedule. We stopped for lunch at a normal restaurant where no one knew my story, where I was just another teenager heading to college. That evening, while helping unpack old boxes in Aunt Teresa's garage, I found one of my first notebooks. The handwriting was small and careful. Mine. Customer records, delivery schedules, satisfaction surveys. Every page documenting crimes I hadn't understood. I sat on the cool concrete floor, flipping through a record of a life that had once made me feel proud. An hour later, Aunt Teresa found me there. She asked if I wanted to keep it for evidence or therapy. I shook my head. We burned it in the backyard fire pit. I watched the pages curl, blacken, disappear. This time, I felt something lift. Not all of it. Some weight stays with you, but enough to breathe easier. College orientation included presentations about campus drug culture, how to spot a dealer, how to stay safe, how to ask for help. I listened, feeling the irony. I'd been the kid they were warning about before I even hit middle school. My roommate complained the lectures were boring. I took notes. I saw the presentations from the other side now. My first social work class covered child welfare systems. The professor asked why we chose this field. People talked about inspiring teachers, personal experiences, wanting to make a difference. When it was my turn, I said, "My mom was sick. I want to help families heal." True enough. No details that would set me apart. Study groups formed easily. I joined one focused on addiction and family systems. When we talked about enabling behaviors or manipulation tactics, I surprised everyone with how much I understood. They assumed I'd done a ton of research. I let them think that. I got a part-time job at the campus tutoring center. I used my organizational skills to make study guides, track student progress, schedule sessions. It was the same skill set, just used for something right this time. My supervisor praised my attention to detail. I smiled and said thank you. I didn't tell her those skills were forged during years of keeping perfect delivery logs. On my birthday, Mom called. It was our first conversation outside of official channels. Her voice sounded different, clearer, sadder. She wished me a happy birthday, asked about school, told me about her vocational training, her plans for release someday. We talked for 15 minutes, about normal things, pretending we'd always been normal people. The anniversary of her arrest came and went, quiet. I went to class, worked my shift, had dinner with friends who didn't know what the date meant to me. That night, I wrote in the journal Dr. Patricia had suggested I keep. I reflected on how far I'd come from the kid who wore an entrepreneur pin in court, how far I still had to go. Professor Williams assigned a research project, Innovative Intervention Strategies. I proposed a study on early identification of children being used in substance operations. She approved immediately and offered to connect me with local agencies.
I accepted, knowing I brought a unique perspective to the research, one that couldn't be found in textbooks alone. My bibliography would include peer-reviewed journals and clinical studies, not customer testimonials scribbled in marble notebooks. The presentation went smoothly. My classmates asked thoughtful questions about recognizing the signs, about supporting children in recovery, about stopping recruitment before it began. I answered professionally, referencing evidence, citing data, quoting experts. Only Professor Williams noticed the subtle tremor in my hands when I described how children rationalize their roles. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded, allowing me to finish on my own terms. Winter break meant returning to Aunt Teresa's house. Sophia had grown taller. She was learning multiplication now. She asked if I could help with her math homework. I smiled, agreed, then caught myself midway through a problem word turning it into a profit equation out of habit. I paused, apologized, restarted with a normal explanation. Sophia didn't notice, but Aunt Teresa did. She squeezed my shoulder, and I knew what it meant. Then the call came from the Victim Services Coordinator. Another trial, another case. A parent in a neighboring county had used 3 of their children as runners. The youngest was 7. They wanted me to testify, not as a victim this time, but as an expert witness, to explain how normalization works, how a child can describe criminal activity with pride. I said yes, even though it meant opening doors I'd rather keep shut. This time, I sat in the witness box with a different posture. I explained grooming, manipulation, how praise can feel like love, even when it's teaching you to harm yourself. I told them how I used to think substance dealing was entrepreneurship, how I wore my entrepreneur pin to court. The jury looked horrified. I saw the defendant's children sitting in the gallery in matching Daddy's Helpers t-shirts. My heart cracked open. They didn't know yet. The guilty verdict came. I felt relief, but not victory. Those children would need time, years to understand what had happened to them. They would likely defend their father for a long time, through placements, through hearings, through the slow burn of realization. I hope they'd find their own Dr. Patricia, their own safe places, their own ways back. Spring semester brought internship placements. I requested the Child Advocacy Center. During the interview, the director asked gentle but direct questions. I gave just enough truth to show I understood, without handing her the whole story. She accepted me, paired me with a supervisor who specialized in trauma-informed care. The first file I read described a 9-year-old girl found with packaging materials in her school backpack. Her mother denied knowledge, but the girl had detailed pricing breakdowns and described helping mommy's home business. She couldn't understand why everyone was upset. I knew that confusion. I had lived that logic. My supervisor saw my reaction. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and I was. I suggested interview strategies, ways to build trust without reinforcing criminal pride. She listened, adjusted, implemented my ideas. The girl eventually disclosed 2 full years of running product, believing she was saving up for a family vacation. Each new case taught me something about myself. The boy who thought he was protecting his dad by keeping perfect ledgers. The girl who believed her mom's boyfriend was teaching her essential life skills. The siblings who competed over who could move more to win approval. Different names, different faces, but all echoes of my story. Mom's letters had changed too. She wrote about the books she was reading, shared moments from her prison job, described the women she was mentoring in recovery. I wrote back about my classes, my internship, the basketball games I now played without analyzing opponents' strategy for market trends. We didn't talk about the past directly anymore, but it lived between every line. Then I got an invitation from the scholarship committee. Would I speak at their annual fundraising dinner? They wanted inspiration, triumph. I said yes, but only if I could tell the truth. Not a fairy tale, no polished happy ending, just honesty. I wrote about recovery as a choice, one you make over and over, about the days I still thought like a dealer, about what it means to grow out of something you once believed in so deeply, about success as something bigger than survival. When I finished my speech, the silence in the room said more than any applause. Several donors came up afterwards. Some shared their stories. One woman pressed a check into my hand.
My son used my grandchildren the same way, she whispered. I held her hand. We didn't need to say anything else.
That one was in prison. One aged out of foster care and disappeared. She said she hoped supporting education might help lead a different family toward a different ending. Summer brought a new opportunity, developing programming at the Advocacy Center. I designed workshops for foster parents raising children from substance-involved families, tools I wished Aunt Teresa had back then. I explained how to recognize the business mindset, how to redirect hyper-organized thinking, how to validate intelligence while carefully challenging criminal logic. The first workshop had 12 participants. They asked the questions I used to live. What do we say when kids brag about substance knowledge? How do we help them see their parents as complicated, not just criminals? How do we support identity beyond the family business? I answered with a balance of personal history and professional training. One foster mom stayed afterward, her eyes glassy. Her foster son had been drawing business plans for weeks. She thought it was harmless until that night's session. We talked for over an hour. About patience, about trust, about gently challenging the framework without shaming the child, about believing in change, even when the child can't see it yet. The center director offered me a permanent job after graduation. Entry-level, growth potential, direct work with exploited children. I accepted without hesitation. Because this was where my story was always meant to lead. Not to a boardroom, not to market success, but to cycle breaking, to safeguarding, to helping kids understand they were never partners, they were victims. Senior year began with an advanced placement at the center. A full caseload, supervision duties, court testimony when needed. I built assessment tools for identifying children affected by substance operations, created training protocols for incoming staff, facilitated support groups for teens aging out. Every single organizational skill Mom ever taught me, now used for healing, not harm. My thesis proposal on identity reformation in criminally exploited children was approved by the committee. My advisor suggested submitting for publication, said it might help set new standards for trauma-informed intervention. I agreed. I spent months translating lived pain into academic clarity, citations and studies to support what I'd always known in my bones, that a child will believe anything if the person they love tells them it's true. Mom's parole hearing came faster than expected. Good behavior, program completion, documented remorse. I submitted a carefully worded support letter, acknowledging her progress, outlining boundaries, requesting continued supervision. The board approved her release with conditions: treatment, monitored contact, scheduled check-ins. I felt relief and anxiety. She looked so small walking out, grayer, thinner, but clearer than I'd seen her in years. We hugged briefly under supervision. We both cried. She whispered apologies I'd already accepted. I whispered forgiveness. She was still learning to believe it. We separated knowing that the real work was just beginning. The transitional housing program placed her 40 minutes from campus, close enough for supervised visits, far enough for both of us to breathe. Our first meeting outside of prison happened at a quiet, neutral restaurant. An advocate present. We talked about her job search, my graduation, the future. Not the business, not the past. We were learning how to exist again as mother and child without crime as the currency between us. Graduation day came with emotions I hadn't expected. Aunt Teresa, Robert, Sophia, all in the audience. Mom watched the live stream, respecting boundaries while celebrating progress. When they called my name, I walked across the stage as someone I couldn't have imagined at 10. Not a little businessman, not an unwitting accomplice, but a college graduate, a social worker, a cycle breaker. The entrepreneur pen was long gone. In its place, a deep, lived understanding that real success means ending harm, not scaling it. The Advocacy Center decorated my new office with a banner that read, "Congratulations." My first official case? A 12-year-old caught selling pills at school.
The child stood in front of me, bright-eyed, animated, proudly explaining his distribution system, customer base, and profit margins. Every word was achingly familiar, every gesture, every note of misplaced pride. I introduced myself gently, using the language of business to build rapport, mirroring his structure before slowly, carefully shifting the framework. I watched as confusion took hold, the same way it had with me. Loyalty wrestled with logic. I held space for his anger as realization began to crack through. I promised he wasn't alone, that others had survived this reckoning, that being smart didn't mean being used, that success could mean something else entirely. Months passed in steady, deliberate rhythm. Home visits, courtrooms, family sessions, training workshops. Each child carried their own version of the story, some filled with rage, others with pride, many with uncertainty. But the common thread was clear. Each one had been harmed by the very adults who were supposed to protect them. I deepened my specialization in criminal exploitation, consulting on state-level cases, publishing in clinical journals, presenting at national conferences. My expertise was built on lived experience and forged into something credible, something useful. Mom marked 1 year clean, then 2. She was promoted at her restaurant job, moved into a better apartment, joined a recovery group. Our relationship changed, slow and deliberate. Monthly lunches turned to weekly phone calls. Supervised visits shifted to quiet dinners. Always with clear boundaries, always rooted in the truth, always building forward while acknowledging what could never be undone. The call came on a Thursday. 10-year-old twins had been caught running a sophisticated medication distribution network from their elementary school. The parents claimed ignorance, but investigators found detailed inventory ledgers in careful, crayon handwriting. The prosecutor asked for expert testimony on normalization, manipulation, the dangerous pride criminally exploited children can feel. I agreed, knowing what it meant. Standing in the very spot where I'd once sat, speaking aloud the truths I'd once fought to deny. From the witness stand, the courtroom looked different. The procedures were the same, the frightened children, the confused parents. But now I was a professional, a translator of experience. I explained how love can be weaponized, how intelligence can be exploited, how a child's identity can be shaped by praise for criminal skill. I watched jurors' faces shift as recognition bloomed, horror at what adults could make children believe. And then the twins took the stand. Their testimonies shattered me. They spoke with excitement about their customer service techniques, about quality control, expansion plans. They described helping Mommy and Daddy's vitamin business with a conviction that was all too familiar. They couldn't understand why anyone was upset. They insisted they were smart, helpful, successful. They reminded me of me, word for word. The guilty verdicts brought no joy, only relief, because now, maybe, the healing could begin. I knew it would take years. The twins would defend their parents through placement shifts, court proceedings, therapy sessions. Slowly, they would have to untangle pride from exploitation. I hoped they'd find safety, support, and the clarity to build something new. As I left the courthouse, my phone rang. The Advocacy Center had received a major grant funding to expand services for criminally exploited children. They wanted me to lead the new division, more staff, more tools, more reach. I said yes instantly, because every child we reached early might never have to sit where I had, might recognize sooner that they were victims, not accomplices. That night I called Mom. She cried happy tears and said she was proud of the person I'd become. We talked about the twins, about the legacy of Horm, about the daily effort of breaking cycles, of building something redemptive, something that helps instead of hurts. I thought about the 10-year-old who once wore an entrepreneur pin to court, who bragged about profit margins and customer loyalty, who believed with his whole heart that success was measured in organized distribution and repeat clients. That version of me felt like a stranger now. But a stranger I still carried, someone whose voice helped me reach the ones who hadn't yet seen the truth. The work was hard. It meant sitting with children as they realized their parents had used them, supporting caregivers through betrayal and resistance, testifying in trials that sometimes reopened old wounds, building programs while staying rooted in personal recovery. There were days I wondered if life might have been easier had I chosen another path. But most days I knew this was exactly where I belonged.
5 years after the arrest, I stood at the front of another conference room, this time as a trainer, speaking to prosecutors, social workers, and therapists about how to recognize and support criminally exploited children. I shared strategies for building trust while challenging criminal thinking. I explained how intelligence and trauma often intersect in ways that complicate healing. I used my story to trace pathways forward for children still trapped where I had once been. The questions came with care. How do you validate a child's business acumen while reframing its use? When should denial be gently challenged, and when should space be made for slow, painful processing? How do you support identity formation that separates self-worth from family crime? I answered from both ends of the spectrum, personal experience and professional training. My life informed my methods. My insight gave depth to evidence-based interventions. One participant stayed afterward to speak privately. She was a guardian ad litem working with a pair of siblings who'd been distributing substances since they were in elementary school. Now teenagers, they still insisted they'd been running a small business. She felt lost, unsure how to advocate for children who saw themselves as entrepreneurs instead of victims. We talked for hours, sketching out specific strategies for her case. That night I wrote in my journal about full circles, about what transformation really meant. Not just healing, but helping others heal. About redefining success as the act of breaking cycles, not building criminal enterprises. About a 10-year-old who once wore an entrepreneur pin, becoming the adult who helped other 10-year-olds understand they deserved more. Mom reached 5 years clean. Her supervision was reduced. We celebrated quietly, both knowing how far she'd come. She'd rebuilt her life through daily meetings, sponsorship, and accountability. I'd rebuilt mine through therapy, education, service, and firm boundaries. Neither of us had arrived. Recovery doesn't end, but we were miles from where we began. The Advocacy Center expanded again, this time into school partnerships. I developed screening tools, trained guidance counselors, and created intervention protocols. We caught some kids before the family business script solidified. While others still needed time to unravel their pride, many transitioned from confusion to understanding more easily. And each one we reached early felt like redemption, not erasure of my own story, but a repurposing it into something powerful. Every child who learned they were valuable outside of crime. Every foster parent who began to understand their child's resistance. Every prosecutor who saw exploitation instead of willing complicity. Each one added to a larger change, systemic, slow, but building, one interaction at a time. The anniversary of the night I burned my entrepreneur pin passed without ceremony. Just another day of meetings, reports, hearings. But that night, I paused to remember it. The way the plastic curled and cracked in the fire, how that moment became the first quiet step toward everything after. I felt grateful for the journey, even while wishing I hadn't needed to take it. Some of the worst beginnings shaped the most meaningful purposes. 10 years after the arrest, I had become someone I never imagined. Someone who used trauma as a tool for service. Someone who turned exploitation into prevention. Someone who helped children realize they were not their family's crimes. Not the entrepreneur I once tried to be, but something more.
Someone who recognized the pride and confusion in kids parroting their parents' language. Someone who could sit with their resistance, validate their intellect, and gently guide them toward the truth. Someone who proved cycles could be broken. The children could heal, that beginnings don't always dictate endings. The real business success was never in profit margins or customer loyalty. It was in lives redirected, in families rebuilding, in systems shifting. It was in every child who learned they were a victim, not a partner. In every parent who chose recovery over harm. In every professional who now saw the exploitation more clearly. That was the entrepreneur I became. Not someone who sold confusion packaged as vitamins, but someone who distributed hope born of hard-won clarity. Not someone who built shadow networks in childhood, but someone who built systems of protection. Not someone who counted pills and cash, but someone who counted lives changed, futures salvaged, and children protected.
The business model I had once defended with pride nearly destroyed me. But the life I built from its ashes became a safeguard for others, so that no child would have to endure the same painful path from exploitation to understanding. Not every story ends neatly. Mine certainly doesn't. My mom still has hard days. I still catch myself slipping into the mindset I learned far too young, scanning for risk, calculating opportunity like a dealer. The twins from that case? They're still in therapy, slowly learning to untangle loyalty from harm. And elsewhere, more children are counting pills right now, convinced they're just helping the family business, proud of being smart, useful, obedient. The work goes on, flawed, slow, but rooted in purpose. But if that 10-year-old version of me could see where I am now, educated, employed, and helping kids like us, I think he'd finally understand. Real success was never about the business. It was surviving it, healing from it, making sure others never have to go through it at all, turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into a foundation for something better. Proving that children are more than their trauma, that healing is real, that cycles can be broken, one confused kid at a time. That's my story. Not the entrepreneurial success I once imagined, but something far more valuable. A life rebuilt on empathy instead of exploitation. A purpose rooted in protection, not profit. Success measured not by revenue, but by the childhoods left intact. The business that took my innocence, it gave me the fire to protect others from losing theirs. And that's the only kind of entrepreneurship that's ever truly mattered.